When the alarms first sounded across the collective's monitoring stations, nobody believed the data. The great star Veloran Prime, a blue supergiant that had burned steady for 12 million years, was dying. Not slowly, as stars were supposed to die, but fast. Too fast. The readings showed core collapse beginning, the kind of violent death that would birth a supernova within standard cycles. High Coordinator Thexnar stood before the Emergency Council, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence as he processed the information on the display. 17 inhabited worlds orbited within the danger zone. 32 billion beings of various species. All of them would die if the star exploded as predicted. "The evacuation calculations are clear," said Science Director Myrel, her crystalline body humming with distress frequencies. "We can save perhaps 800 million, maybe a billion if we push our ships beyond safe limits. The rest—" She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. The council chamber fell into heavy silence. 31 billion deaths. It was a number too large to comprehend, too terrible to accept. Species that had joined the galactic collective thousands of years ago would simply cease to exist. Their cultures, their histories, their children, all gone in a flash of stellar fire. "There must be something else we can do," said Representative Corbeth, his insected mandibles clicking with anxiety. "Some technology, some method. The collective has existed for 100,000 years. Surely our science can offer a solution." Myrel's frequencies shifted to a lower, sadder tone. "We are powerless against stellar physics. No species in the collective has ever developed technology capable of affecting the internal processes of a star. The energy scales involved are beyond anything we can manipulate. We can harvest solar energy. We can build shields against radiation, but we cannot stop a supernova." "Then we are merely here to witness death," said another representative, her voice hollow with despair. It was at this moment that a minor diplomatic aide stepped forward. She was young by her species standards, with green skin and large dark eyes. Her name was Treya, and she had been assigned to the human embassy for the past 3 cycles. "High Coordinator," Treya said, her voice small but steady, "I may know someone who can help." Thexnar turned all 4 eyes toward her. "Speak." "The humans," Treya said. "They have been working on stellar engineering projects. Theoretical work mostly, but I have seen their research papers. They believe it may be possible to influence stellar processes through carefully placed gravitational manipulations and focused energy injections." Myrel's body flickered with skepticism. "The humans have been part of the collective for less than 200 years. They are a young species, barely out of their own solar system. Their science, while creative, is primitive by our standards." "With respect, Science Director," Treya replied, "I have worked with humans closely. They are different. They do not accept impossible as an answer. When they see a problem, they do not stop until they have found a solution. I have watched them argue about stellar physics in their embassy cafeteria, drawing equations on napkins, debating theories that our own scientists abandoned as impractical millennia ago." "Impractical theories will not save 31 billion lives," Myrel said coldly. "No," Treya agreed, "but perhaps impractical species might." Thexnar considered for a long moment. The humans were an oddity in the collective. They had arrived with primitive, faster-than-light technology that should not have worked according to established physics, yet somehow did. They had solved problems that older species had given up on. They had a strange habit of treating the word impossible as a personal challenge. "Contact the human embassy," Thexnar ordered. "Request an immediate meeting with their senior scientists. We have nothing to lose by asking." 3 hours later, Dr. Elena Vasquez stood before the Emergency Council. She was a small woman with gray streaking her dark hair, and she had been in the middle of her breakfast when the urgent summons arrived. But her eyes were sharp and alert as she listened to the situation report. "You want us to stop a supernova," she said when they finished. It was not a question. We want you to tell us if it can be done, Thexnar clarified. Our own scientists believe it is impossible. Dr. Vasquez smiled. It was a strange smile, one that made several council members uncomfortable. Impossible is a funny word, High Coordinator. It usually just means nobody has figured out how to do it yet. She pulled out a small device and projected a holographic model of Veloran Prime. Her fingers moved through the data, pulling up readings and calculations. The core is collapsing because the nuclear fusion that creates outward pressure is losing the battle against gravity, she explained. The iron core is growing, and iron cannot fuse to produce energy. Once the core reaches a critical mass, it will collapse in a fraction of a second, and the rebound will blow the star apart. We are aware of the physics, Myrel said impatiently. Then you should also be aware that the physics gives us several intervention points, Dr. Vasquez continued, unruffled by the interruption. The core hasn't collapsed yet. We have perhaps 30 standard cycles before it does. In that time, we might be able to reduce the core mass below the collapse threshold. Reduce the mass of a stellar core. Myrel's frequencies reached a pitch of disbelief. You are talking about removing material from the heart of a star. The temperatures alone would vaporize any probe or ship. Not if we use focused gravitational beams to extract the material remotely, Dr. Vasquez said. We have been developing the technology for asteroid mining. The principles scale up. Scale up from asteroids to stellar cores. It's just a matter of energy, Dr. Vasquez said simply, and we know where to get plenty of that. She gestured at the dying star in the hologram, from Veloran Prime itself. The council chamber erupted in noise. Representatives shouted questions and objections. Science Director Myrel's body flickered through multiple colors of skepticism and outrage. Only Thexnar remained calm, watching the human scientist with his 4 ancient eyes. You truly believe this can work? He asked when the noise died down. Dr. Vasquez met his gaze. I believe we have to try. I need to contact Earth and our research stations. I need every human physicist, engineer, and mathematician we have. And I need access to the collective's manufacturing facilities. She paused. We are going to build something that has never been built before, something that should not be possible, and we are going to do it in 30 cycles. What will you need? Thexnar asked. Everything, Dr. Vasquez said. Every ship, every factory, every resource the collective can spare, and complete authority to direct the operation. You ask for much. I am trying to save 31 billion lives. That seems worth asking for a lot. Thexnar was silent for a long moment. Then he rose from his seat, his ancient body unfolding to its full height. The Galactic Collective hereby grants Dr. Elena Vasquez emergency authority over Operation Stellar Salvation. All resources are at her disposal. All species will cooperate. He looked around the council chamber. If the humans say they can save us, then we will give them every chance to do so. Dr. Vasquez nodded once, her expression serious. Thank you, High Coordinator. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a star to save. She turned and walked out of the chamber, already speaking rapidly into her communication device, summoning her colleagues from across the galaxy. Behind her, the council sat in stunned silence, wondering if they had just witnessed the beginning of a miracle or the hopeless delusion of a young species that did not know when to give up. The human response to the crisis was unlike anything the Galactic Collective had ever witnessed. Within hours of Dr. Vasquez's meeting with the Council, communication channels across human space lit up with activity. Scientists abandoned their current projects. Engineers pulled themselves away from their families. Mathematicians who had been quietly working on abstract problems suddenly found their skills in desperate demand. Dr. Marcus Wung, a theoretical physicist from the Mars Research Institute, was the first to arrive at the hastily established command center near Veloran Prime. He was followed by Dr. Asha Akafer, an engineer who specialized in exotic energy manipulation. Then came Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a mathematician whose work on gravitational field equations had been considered too abstract for practical application until now. Dozens more followed, then hundreds. Ships carrying human specialists arrived from every corner of human space. Some came from Earth itself, making the journey an emergency acceleration that pushed the limits of their vessels. Others came from distant colony worlds, responding to the call without hesitation. "I've never seen anything like it," Treya said to High Coordinator Thexnar as they watched the human ships arriving. "They are coming from everywhere. Some of these people have traveled for days without sleep." "What drives them?" Thexnar asked. "These are not their worlds, these are not their people. Why do they sacrifice so much for strangers?" Treya considered the question. "I asked Dr. Vasquez the same thing. She said something strange. She said that humanity learned long ago that they are strongest when they face problems together, that helping others is not weakness, it is strength, that the measure of a species is not how they protect themselves, but how they protect those who cannot protect themselves." Pretty words. "Yes," Treya agreed. But she also said that humans are just really bad at accepting that something cannot be done. She called it stubbornness. In the command center, Dr. Vasquez had established a war room unlike any the collective had seen. Holographic displays showed Veloran Prime from every angle. Data streams flowed in from monitoring stations across the system. Human scientists argued loudly over calculations, erasing and redrawing equations on digital boards, testing ideas and discarding them just as quickly. "The core mass is the key," Dr. Wang was saying, his hands moving through the hologram. "If we can reduce it by approximately 15%, we should be able to halt the collapse. The star will still be damaged, but it will stabilize." 15% of a stellar core is still an enormous amount of material, Dr. Ackefer pointed out. "We're talking about extracting mass equivalent to several gas giants." "Which is why we need multiple extraction points," Dr. Tanaka said, her equations filling a nearby screen. "I've calculated that we can create stable gravitational tunnels through the star's outer layers. The math is unusual, but it works." Science Director Myrel had been observing the human scientists with growing amazement. Their methods were chaotic, their discussions loud and sometimes hostile. They interrupted each other constantly. They made wild suggestions that violated established principles, and somehow, impossibly, they were making progress. "Your gravitational tunnel concept is interesting," she said, approaching Dr. Tanaka's display. "But the energy requirements are beyond anything we can generate." "That's why we're not going to generate the energy ourselves," Dr. Tanaka replied with a slight smile. "We're going to steal it from the star. Veloran Prime is outputting more energy in a single second than the entire collective uses in a year. We just need to redirect a tiny fraction of that output into our gravitational projectors." "You want to use the star's own energy to tear material from its core." "Exactly." Myrel's body flickered with colors the translator could not interpret. "That is either genius or madness." "Humans have been told that about most of their best ideas," Dr. Vasquez said, joining the conversation. "Now, Science Director, I understand that the collective has energy collection technology that is far superior to ours. Can you help us design collectors that can survive close approach to Veloran Prime?" For the first time, Myrel's skepticism began to shift toward something else. These humans were not just blindly charging forward. They recognized their limitations. They were actively seeking help from species with greater experience in areas where they were weak. It was a clever approach, one that combined human creativity with collective technology. "I can have our best engineers work with your team," Myrel said slowly. "But I must ask, Dr. Vasquez, what happens if this fails? What happens if we invest all our resources into this plan and it does not work?" "Then we will have tried," Dr. Vasquez said simply. And we will have 31 billion people who knew that someone fought for them until the very end. That has to count for something. The work began immediately. Collective manufacturing facilities, which had been designed to build starships over the course of years, were reprogrammed to produce components for the gravitational projectors. Human engineers worked alongside collective technicians, teaching and learning simultaneously, combining their knowledge in ways that neither could have achieved alone. The energy collectors proved to be the most challenging component. They needed to get close enough to Veloran Prime to harvest significant energy, but the intense radiation and heat would destroy conventional materials within seconds. The solution came from an unlikely collaboration between human materials scientists and the silicon-based Crester, a species that naturally existed at extremely high temperatures. Your body can withstand temperatures that would vaporize steel, Dr. Acaffer said to the Crester representative. How do you do it? The Crester made a gesture that the translator interpreted as amusement. We have biological structures that convert thermal energy into forms our bodies can use. We have never shared this knowledge because we assumed no other species would have use for it. Would you be willing to share it now? The Crester was silent for a moment. 31 billion lives, including many of our own people on the worlds around Veloran Prime. Yes, human, we will share everything we know. The project grew larger with each passing day. Species that had barely interacted before found themselves working side by side. The aquatic Melthari provided insights into fluid dynamics that helped model the movement of plasma within the star. The insectoid Corvath contributed their collective computing power to the massive calculations required. The energy beings of the seventh sphere offered to directly interface with the collectors, providing real-time control at speeds no mechanical system could match. And at the center of it all, the humans worked tirelessly. They slept in shifts, ate at their workstations, and pushed themselves beyond what anyone thought possible. When problems arose, they attacked them with a fierce determination that amazed their collective colleagues. I don't understand, a Melthari engineer said to Dr. Wang during one of the rare quiet moments. Your species is so young. You lack the resources and experience of older civilizations. Why do you not despair? Dr. Wang smiled tiredly. Because we've faced extinction before. Climate change, nuclear weapons, pandemics. We've stared into the abyss more times than I can count. And every time we've found a way through. Not because we were the smartest or the strongest, but because we refused to give up. And if this time is different, if there is no way through, then we'll die trying, Dr. Wang said, but we won't die giving up. On the 15th day, the first gravitational projector was completed. It was a massive structure, larger than many space stations, and it required a crew of thousands to operate. But when they powered it up for the first test, targeting a small asteroid as a proof of concept, the asteroid shattered into dust. Too much power, Dr. Tanaka said, studying the readings. We need to refine the focus. Can we do it in time? Someone asked. Dr. Vasquez looked at the countdown display. 15 days until core collapse. 15 days to save 31 billion lives. We have to, she said. We have no other choice. The 20th day brought disaster. One of the energy collectors, positioned dangerously close to Veloran Prime, suffered a catastrophic failure. The intense radiation had found a weak point in the thermal shielding, and within seconds the collector was gone. So were the 12 crew members aboard. Dr. Vasquez received the news in silence. She stood very still for a long moment, her face expressionless. Then she took a deep breath and turned to her team. Names. Captain Sarah Mitchell, Engineer Dmitry Volkov, Navigator Priya Sharma. The list went on. 8 humans, 2 Melthari, 2 Crester, all dead in an instant. We should have tested the shielding more thoroughly, Dr. Acaffer said, her voice thick with guilt. I should have caught the flaw. There wasn't time for more testing, Dr. Vasquez replied. There never was. These people knew the risks. They chose to be here anyway. She looked around at the stunned faces of her team. We honor them by continuing, by finishing what they started. But the loss hit the project hard. Several collective species began to question whether the plan was worth the cost. Representatives spoke of the mathematics of sacrifice, of whether it was better to save what could be saved through evacuation rather than gamble everything on an untested technology. High Coordinator Thexnar called an emergency session of the council. Dr. Vasquez was summoned to explain herself. 12 lives lost, Representative Corbeth said, and your project is still not ready. How many more will die before you admit failure? We have lost 12, Dr. Vasquez acknowledged. We are trying to save 31 billion. I grieve for every death, but I will not let their sacrifice be in vain by giving up now. Your confidence borders on arrogance, Myrel said. Her tone was different than before. She had been working alongside the humans for weeks now. She had seen their dedication, their creativity, their refusal to accept defeat. But I find myself strangely reassured by it. The council debated for hours. Some called for an end to the project. Others urged patience. In the end, Thexnar made the decision himself. The humans have given us hope where there was none, he said. They have united species that had not worked together in millennia. They have created technology that we believed impossible. 10 days remain. We will give them every one of those days. And if they fail, then we will have lost nothing that was not already lost. Dr. Vasquez nodded her thanks and returned to work. There was no time for rest, no time for doubt. The gravitational projectors were being installed around Veloran Prime in a precise mathematical pattern calculated by Dr. Tanaka. Each one had to be positioned exactly, or the extraction would fail. The energy collectors had been redesigned using the information from the Crester. The new models could withstand much higher temperatures, and they were crewed entirely by volunteers who understood they might not survive. I want to help, Treya said to Dr. Vasquez on the 25th day. I am not a scientist or an engineer, but I can coordinate communications between the different species. I can help translate not just words but ideas. Dr. Vasquez looked at the young diplomat. You've already been doing that. I've seen you smoothing over misunderstandings, helping people work together. You're more valuable than you know. The humans, Treya hesitated. You are so different from us, from all of us. I have watched your people work themselves to exhaustion for strangers. I have seen them risk their lives for beings they have never met. Why? Because someone has to, Dr. Vasquez said simply. Because if we don't try, who will? That is not an answer. Maybe not, but it's the only answer I have. The final days were a blur of activity. The last gravitational projector was installed with just 3 days to spare. The energy collectors were positioned in a ring around the star, their crews ready to harvest the power needed for the extraction. The command center was filled with displays showing every aspect of the operation. We're ready, Dr. Wang announced on the morning of the 28th day. All systems are operational, projectors are aligned, collectors are functioning within acceptable parameters. The core collapse is accelerating, Dr. Tanaka added, her face pale with exhaustion. We have perhaps 48 hours before it passes the point of no return. Dr. Vasquez studied the displays. Somewhere out there, on 17 worlds, 31 billion beings were waiting. Some of them knew about the project and had chosen to stay, putting their faith in beings they had never met. Others had no idea their lives hung in the balance. Then we begin, she said. Initiate the extraction sequence. The energy collectors fired first, drinking deeply of Veloran Prime's radiation and converting it into usable power. The energy flowed through specially designed conduits to the gravitational projectors. And then, slowly, impossibly, the projectors reached into the star itself. On the monitoring displays, Streams of superheated plasma began to rise from Veloran Prime's surface. The gravitational tunnels were working, creating pathways through the star's outer layers directly to the collapsing core. Matter that had been destined to trigger a supernova was being pulled outward, extracted from the heart of the dying star. Core mass is decreasing, Dr. Tanaka reported, her voice shaking with a mixture of terror and excitement. 0.1%, 0.2%. We need 15%, Dr. Wang reminded everyone. Maintain extraction rate. The next hours were the longest of anyone's life. The extraction continued, steady and relentless. The star raged against the intrusion, flares and prominences erupting across its surface. 2 more collectors were lost, their crews killed in an instant, but the others held their positions, their crews refusing to retreat. Core mass at -5%, Dr. Tanaka announced as the first day ended. We're on track. But on the second day, disaster struck again. One of the gravitational projectors malfunctioned, its focus wavering. The extraction tunnel it maintained collapsed, and a massive flare erupted from Veloran Prime's surface. The flare raced outward at a significant fraction of light speed, heading directly for the nearest inhabited world. Kelro's IV is in the path, someone shouted. Population 4 billion. They have 12 hours before impact. Dr. Vasquez felt her heart sink. They were so close to saving everyone. And now 4 billion people were about to die because of a single equipment failure. Can we deflect it? She asked. Not with our projectors, Dr. Wang said. They're all committed to the extraction. If we divert any of them, we won't reach the 15% threshold. Then we save 31 billion instead of 35 billion, someone said quietly. Dr. Vasquez shook her head. No, we save everyone or we fail. There has to be another way. It was Treya who found the solution. She had been coordinating communications when the alert came, and she had immediately reached out to every species in the system. The seventh sphere entities, she said, bursting into the command center. They say they can intercept the flare. They can absorb and redirect its energy. The energy levels would destroy them, Myrel objected. They know, Treya said quietly. They are willing to sacrifice themselves. They say. She paused to check her translation. They say they have watched the humans give everything for strangers. They say it would be an honor to do the same. The seventh sphere entities moved with a grace that defied description. They were beings of pure energy, existing in a form that most species could barely perceive. To watch them was to see light dancing with purpose, consciousness flowing through the void. 17 of them gathered in the path of the stellar flare. They had minutes to prepare, minutes to say goodbye to each other in whatever way such beings did, and then the wall of fire reached them. The command center went silent as they watched the confrontation. The 17 entities spread themselves thin, forming a barrier of living light across the flare's path. When the superheated plasma struck them, they absorbed its energy, channeling it through themselves and redirecting it harmlessly into space. It took 4 minutes, 4 minutes of unimaginable pain and sacrifice. One by one, the entities burned out, their forms dissolving as they exceeded their capacity to survive. But they held their positions until the end. The flare was deflected. Kelro's IV was saved. They're gone, Treya whispered, tears streaming down her face. All 17 of them gone. Dr. Vasquez bowed her head. 29 people and 17 energy beings had now given their lives for this mission. Their sacrifice weighed on her like a physical burden, but she could not stop. Not now. Resume extraction, she ordered, her voice rough. We finish what they died for. The final hours of the operation pushed everyone to their limits. The gravitational projectors were operating at maximum capacity, straining against the immense forces of the dying star. The energy collectors were overheating, their crews performing constant repairs just to keep them functioning. Core mass at -12%, Dr. Tanaka reported, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. -13%. We're approaching the threshold. How much time do we have? Dr. Wang asked. 4 hours until the core reaches critical collapse, maybe less. Dr. Vasquez studied the projections. They were going to be close, too close. At the current extraction rate, they would reach the threshold just minutes before collapse. If anything went wrong, if any more equipment failed, they would fall short. Can we increase the extraction rate? She asked. Not without risking total projector failure, Dr. HFY replied. We're already pushing them beyond their design limits. Then we push them further. Elena, Dr. HFY began to protest. 31 billion people, Asia. We don't get a second chance at this. If we fail by a fraction of a percent, they all die. I would rather destroy every projector we have and succeed than preserve our equipment and watch billions burn. The order went out. Every projector increased its output. Warning indicators lit up across the monitoring displays as the machines were pushed into dangerous territory. But the extraction rate increased, and the core mass continued to fall. -14%, Dr. Tanaka announced. We're almost there. Then the alarm started screaming. Projector 7 is failing, someone shouted. We're losing gravitational coherence in the extraction tunnel. If that tunnel collapses, we'll lose 20% of our extraction capacity, Dr. Wang said. We won't make the threshold. Dr. Vasquez's mind raced. There had to be a solution. There was always a solution. That was what humans believed. That was what they had proven time and time again throughout their history. The other projectors, she said suddenly. Can we redistribute their focus to compensate for Projector 7? The mathematics would be impossible, Myrel objected. To recalculate the gravitational fields in real time while the extraction is ongoing. I can do it, Dr. Tanaka said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. She was pale, trembling with exhaustion, but her eyes were clear. I've been studying the field equations for weeks. I know them better than anyone. I can calculate the adjustments. The processing power required, Myrel began. I don't need processors, I can do it in my head. Dr. Tanaka met the science director's skeptical gaze. Mathematics has always been more than numbers to me. It's been my language since I was a child. Let me try. Dr. Vasquez made the decision in an instant. Do it. Everyone else, route your projector controls through Dr. Tanaka's station. She calls the adjustments, you implement them. No delays, no questions. What followed was a performance that would be studied by scientists for generations. Dr. Yuki Tanaka stood at her station, eyes half closed, speaking in a continuous stream of numbers and coordinates. Her voice never wavered, her calculations never faltered. As Projector 7 failed completely, she redistributed its load across the remaining machines with a precision that seemed almost supernatural. -14.5%, someone reported. Extraction rate holding steady. The minutes ticked by. More alarms sounded as additional projectors approached failure. Each time, Dr. Tanaka adjusted, compensated, found new configurations that kept the extraction going. She was performing calculations that would normally require entire teams of mathematicians and days of computation, and she was doing it in seconds. -14.8%, -14.9%. Time to core collapse, Dr. Vasquez asked. 12 minutes. 12 minutes to extract the last fraction of material. 12 minutes to save 31 billion lives. 12 minutes of hope. Dr. Tanaka's voice continued its steady stream of adjustments. 2 more projectors failed, but she had already prepared for their loss, already calculated how to maintain the extraction rate with the remaining machines. She was pushing them far beyond their limits now, burning them out one by one, but she was squeezing every last bit of usefulness from each device. -15%, the announcement came. The command center erupted in cheers. Beings of every species embraced each other, cried out in joy, collapsed in relief. They had done it. They had reached the threshold. But Dr. Vasquez held up her hand for silence. Time to core collapse. 3 minutes, the core is still collapsing. It's slowing down, but we don't know if we've done enough, Dr. Wang finished quietly. The models said 15% should be sufficient, but the models could be wrong. They waited. 3 minutes stretched into an eternity. Every eye was fixed on the displays showing Veloran Prime's core. The collapse was slowing, but it had not stopped. The core was still shrinking, still approaching the critical density that would trigger a supernova. 2 minutes. Dr. Vasquez found herself holding her breath. Beside her, Treya was clutching her hands together, her green skin pale with fear. Myrel's crystalline body had gone almost entirely dark, all her energy focused on the readings. 1 minute. The collapse was still slowing. The curve on the display was flattening. But would it flatten enough? Would it stop before reaching the point of no return? 30 seconds. Silence. Every being in the command center was frozen, watching, waiting. Core collapse, stabilizing, Dr. Wang's voice cracked. The core has stopped shrinking, the pressure equilibrium it's holding. Does that mean? Treya could not finish the question. It means we did it, Dr. Vasquez said, her voice barely a whisper. Veloran Prime is not going to explode. The star will survive. The planets will survive. 31 billion people will survive. The celebration that followed the stabilization of Veloran Prime lasted for days across 17 worlds. Beings who had prepared for death instead found themselves alive, their homes intact, their futures restored. Children who had been told they would not see another sunrise grew up to tell their own children about the miracle they had witnessed. But for those who had worked on the project, the aftermath was quieter. Dr. Vasquez stood at a memorial ceremony on the command station, reading the names of the 46 beings who had given their lives. 8 humans, 14 members of various collective species, and 17 seventh sphere entities who had sacrificed themselves to save Kelro's IV. They did not die as members of different species, Dr. Vasquez said, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. They died as one people, one family. They died for strangers, and in doing so, they proved that there are no strangers, only friends we have not yet met. High Coordinator Thexnar approached her after the ceremony. His ancient eyes held a new light, something that had not been there before. Dr. Vasquez, he said formally, the Galactic Collective owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid. You came to us as a young species, barely known beyond your own corner of the galaxy. You leave as heroes. We didn't do this alone, Dr. Vasquez replied. Every species contributed. The Crester gave us their thermal technology. The Melthari helped with the fluid dynamics. The Korvath provided computing power. And the seventh sphere, she paused, emotion threatening to overwhelm her. The seventh sphere gave everything. Yes, but it was human leadership that brought us together, human determination that refused to accept defeat, human creativity that found solutions where we saw only problems. Thexnar placed a tentacle on her shoulder in a gesture of respect. I have lived for a very long time, Dr. Vasquez. I have seen many species come and go, but I have never seen anything like your people. We're just stubborn, she said with a tired smile. Perhaps, but it is a good kind of stubborn. In the weeks that followed, the impact of what humanity had accomplished spread throughout the galaxy. News of the stabilization reached species that had never heard of Earth or its people. Stories were told and retold, growing with each telling, about the small, young species that had dared to fight a dying star. But it was not just the story of the stabilization that spread. It was the story of how it had been done. How humans had not come as conquerors or saviors, but as partners. How they had sought knowledge from other species instead of pretending they had all the answers. How they had inspired beings from across the galaxy to work together toward a common goal. Science Director Myrel requested a meeting with Dr. Vasquez before the human delegation returned to Earth. They met in the observation deck overlooking Veloran Prime, which now burned with a new stability, its surface calm for the first time in months. "I owe you an apology," Myrel said. "When you first proposed this mission, I thought you were fools. Young fools who did not understand the limits of what was possible. I was wrong." "You were skeptical. That's not the same as being foolish." "I was afraid," Myrel admitted. "My species has been part of the collective for 80,000 years. We have learned to accept our limitations. We have learned that some things cannot be done. And then you came along and showed us that perhaps we had simply stopped trying." Dr. Vasquez watched the star for a long moment. "Do you know what my grandmother used to tell me? She grew up during a time when my planet was dying from pollution and climate change. Everyone said it was too late to fix it, that we had passed the point of no return. What happened? We fixed it anyway. It took generations. It cost everything we had, but we refused to give up. My grandmother used to say that the only impossible thing was giving up. Everything else was just a problem waiting for a solution." Myrel's body shimmered with colors that suggested deep thought. "The collective has existed for 100,000 years. In that time, we have built great civilizations, explored most of the galaxy, developed technologies that would seem like magic to younger species. But we have also grown comfortable, complacent. We have forgotten how to dream." "Then maybe that's what we can offer you," Dr. Vasquez said. "Not our technology, which is primitive compared to yours, not our knowledge, which is limited, but our way of looking at the universe, our refusal to accept that anything is truly impossible. You have already offered it, and the collective has already begun to change. I have received reports from research stations across the galaxy. Scientists who had abandoned projects decades ago are returning to their work. Problems that were declared unsolvable are being examined with new eyes. You have sparked something, Dr. Vasquez, something that may be more important than saving Veloran Prime." Treya found Dr. Vasquez still at the observation deck hours later. The young diplomat had changed since the beginning of the crisis. She walked with more confidence now, her eyes holding a wisdom that had not been there before. "I've been reassigned," Treya said. "The High Coordinator has asked me to serve as a permanent liaison between the collective and humanity. He says I understand your people better than anyone." "That's quite an honor." "It terrifies me," Treya admitted. "But I have learned something from you. Fear is not a reason to refuse. It is a sign that something is important." Dr. Vasquez laughed, a genuine sound of joy that had been rare during the long weeks of the crisis. "You sound like a human." "I will take that as a compliment." It was meant as one. They stood together, watching Veloran Prime, the star that should have died but did not, the star that would now burn for millions of years more, warming 17 worlds, nurturing 31 billion lives. "What happens now?" Treya asked. "We go home," Dr. Vasquez said. "We rest, we grieve for those we lost, and then we find the next impossible problem and figure out how to solve it." "That is very human of you." "Yes," Dr. Vasquez agreed, "it is." When the human delegation departed, they were escorted by an honor guard of ships from every species in the collective. It was the greatest display of respect ever shown to any member species. As the human vessels jumped to faster-than-light travel, heading home to Earth, they left behind a galaxy that had been forever changed. In the collective's archives, the event was recorded as the Veloran stabilization, but across the galaxy, it became known by another name. The day humanity proved that nothing is impossible. The day intelligence preserved planetary life. The day a young species taught an ancient civilization how to hope again. And on 17 worlds, children grew up hearing stories of the strange creatures from a small blue planet who had saved them all. They learned that humans were small and fragile, that they lived short lives and came from an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. But they also learned that humans never gave up, that humans faced the impossible and refused to accept it, that humans, for all their limitations, had something that many older species had lost: hope, determination, the unshakable belief that tomorrow could be better than today. And in quiet moments, when they looked up at Veloran Prime burning steady in their sky, they whispered a prayer of thanks, not to any god, but to the humans who had taught them the most important lesson of all. Impossible is just a word, and words can always be rewritten.